Like I said, that was never done before until resveratrol came along, so that is huge. What's going on, guys? It's Jacob from Sunday Lifters. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be talking about resveratrol. Now this is a bit of a kind of like a miracle compound I'd not really heard about before. Well, I'd heard about it in red wine, and I knew people have said in the past that red wine's really healthy and should consider having more red wine. And I think the sort of all of that came about after some research was done on resveratrol in the early 2000s. Now we are going to talk about what it actually does today, the minimum effective dose. We're going to cover, sort of the application and why specifically you might want to consider having this if you are overweight, and we'll talk about the reason that is later. But before we get into that, guys, if you could drop this video a like, a comment, and possibly consider subscribing, that would really help the channel grow, and it is hugely appreciated. So what is resveratrol? Resveratrol is a pain in the arse to say. Resveratrol is a naturally occurring still bean that seems to have multiple health promoting effects. Resveratrol is produced in certain plants and foods we eat, such as grapes, blueberries, raspberries, peanuts, apples, you name it. There's quite a lot of them, but it seems to be produced specifically when those plants or foods, like when they're growing, they are put under stress or damaged in some kind of way. So what does resveratrol do? Now there's loads and loads of things that it does, to be honest. There's been loads of studies done, again, like I say, since sort of the back end of the 1990s and since the early 2000s. So you got about 20 years of literature on this, hundreds of animal studies, and quite a few human studies now as well. Probably you're talking more than 10. Resveratrol exerts multiple biological effects, such as anti-inflammatory, sort of cell proliferative, and also antioxidant as well. Experimental and sort of preclinical studies have even sort of attributed more potential benefits to resveratrol, such as sort of cardiovascular benefits, also sort of like chemopreventative activity in some specific cancers, and also it's been shown in sort of the early studies of resveratrol that it actually made sort of basic life forms such as yeast live up to 30% longer. In the rodent studies we have, and the sort of few human studies we've also acquired, we can see that it seems to activate the AMP kinase pathway, and also sirtuins as well, specifically SIRT1 or sirtuin-1. If you don't know, those are sort of primal nutrient sort of sensing and controlling pathways within the body. So one of the most interesting things about resveratrol, unfortunately, it has only been sort of done in a rodent study at the moment. We don't have human evidence for this, but it is incredibly promising. They actually got rats to supplement resveratrol, and what they did was they fed a certain subgroup of those rats a high carb, high sort of saturated fat, high sugar diet that actually made those rats obese. Now resveratrol seemed to be the very first molecule in any study ever that's actually made a mammal that is obese sort of live as long as the lean equivalents within a control study. Like I said, that was never done before until resveratrol came along, so that is huge. So in human trials in 2019 and 2020, we actually saw for sure that insulin sensitivity seemed to go up in those who supplement resveratrol, and we know that sort of insulin sensitivity is highly linked with longevity, lifespan, and susceptibility to chronic disease. Not only this, but subjects also saw a lowering of LDL, bad cholesterol, and HDL, the good cholesterol, was slightly upregulated. So what dosage should we be looking at? I'll start by prefacing this by explaining to you guys the French paradox. Now, the French paradox is essentially that in France and the French people in general seem to not have as many instances of heart or chronic diseases related to a diet that's high in sort of saturated fats, and also a population of quite a lot of smokers compared to other parts of the world. Now, what they are starting to believe is that potentially resveratrol might be the thing that's allowed for this cardiovascular protection in the French, because although in order to get the sort of minimum effective dose of resveratrol, which we estimate is around 250 milligrams in a day, you'd be lucky if you were getting 1 milligram in a 6-ounce glass of red wine. Now, obviously, it depends on how dark the red wine is, how much it was stressed out. The sort of resveratrol content can vary, but it's safe to assume we're getting somewhere between 0.8 and 1.2 at a maximum milligrams of resveratrol per 6-ounce glass of wine we drink. So essentially, in order to get the minimum effective dose in a day, you'd be looking at around 240 to 300 glasses of wine in a day, which basically isn't possible. But now what could have happened is, if the French were drinking red wine over many generations, they could have had a sort of polymorphism within their genome that sort of has made them so they, don't need as much resveratrol to get the same benefits as the rest of the world in this cardiovascular protection that they may or may not be getting from the resveratrol. But also it could just be that over time a single person could build up to the minimum effective dose of resveratrol. If they were drinking maybe a couple of glasses of wine a day, over maybe 5 years, they'd get to that 250 milligram sort of concentration. It's hard to say, and they don't know for sure if resveratrol is the reason for the French paradox, but it certainly is a viable sort of theory at the moment. So humans who are already supplementing this, some people take 1 gram a day, some people take 2 grams a day, some people even take 5 grams a day and don't have any negative side effects. I think anything above 5 grams a day, you could probably start to expect symptoms of an acute overdose, which are sort of all the usual stuff: stomach upset, diarrhea, nausea, maybe a bit of fatigue, all that kind of stuff. I would be happy on sort of 1 gram a day, to be honest. I am going to start after I saw David Sinclair's latest episode of the Lifespan podcast, which I will link down below. Highly recommend it. He is one of the scientists who led the research on resveratrol, so it's definitely worth giving that a watch. And like I say, I will link it so you can check it out. He really goes over the finer details, as well as some other supplements you can implement for longevity. But ever since I watched that episode of the podcast, I decided that I will be supplementing resveratrol from now on. I'm going to start on 500 milligrams a day, but you might want to start higher, you might want to start lower. Like I say, 250 milligrams a day being the minimum effective dose. However much you decide to have or not have, you need to make sure that you are having it with a source of fat or a meal, because it's not sort of water soluble. It won't, if you put it in your water supply, if you're drinking water, it won't absorb. Try and have it with something like high fat, something like yogurt, cheese, oil, or just like a meal with a mix of your macronutrients in there for maximum absorption, or any absorption, because like I say, it won't absorb in water. There are a lot of benefits to resveratrol, and if you are thinking about jumping on it as a supplement like myself, do make sure you discuss it with a doctor, especially if you have any underlying health conditions. But yeah, it seems very favourable. What I would say is, if you are overweight, you should definitely consider sort of taking this based on the results from that rodent study. It's highly likely that a similar thing will happen in humans. Not guaranteed, but it's a great indicator. And because of that activation of sirtuins and the AMP kinase pathway, we've seen time and time again that the activation of those two things does help with longevity, general health, fighting off chronic disease, and it almost makes your body think you're in a state of fasting almost, or at least it takes a similar response. So definitely worth looking into, guys. If you did find this video useful, please do drop it a like, drop it a comment, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. You can also hit that bell icon to stay up to date with any new videos I'm doing. You can check out my socials. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Sunday Lifters. I'm not going to lie, I've sacked off Twitter because I don't know why my account got banned after 2 fucking tweets, and I was just like, this is an outdated platform anyway. I might jump on TikTok at some point, but Twitter's bollocks, so it can fuck off. Yeah, finally, if you want to do online coaching or get a workout plan, you can email me at sundaylifters@gmail.com. I have unfortunately stopped doing my diet plans just because I'm trying to get out more videos and doing the workout plans I enjoy. The diet plans just kind of take up a lot of time and I don't get much back from them. So unfortunately, I won't be doing those anymore. But thanks to everyone who bought one. Thanks for sticking about again, guys, and I'll see you back here again very soon.